Welcome to today's edition of Around the WaterCooler from the CIO WaterCooler. And my name is Neil C. Hughes, and I'm hosting a conversation today about creating a vision for your cloud transformation strategy. And I have a panel of two experts who are going to bring this to life today. And I'd love for you both to introduce yourselves. So to begin with, Byron, can you tell everyone watching a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Byron Wilkinson. I'm a consultant, associate partner in Kyndryl, who, as some people will know, some people won't, is a recent offshoot from IBM, looks at infrastructure, consulting, a bunch of other practices and managed services in particular. I've been in the industry for probably about, well, longer than I'd like to say, but probably over 30 years. I've been a freelance for a lot of that, including part owner of a consulting company for some years. And in recent years, I've done a lot of work for IBM before it became Kyndryl, and recently rejoined as an employee of Kyndryl, which has been a great experience so far over the last 3.5 years. And I've largely dealt in the last, say, 15 years in large, both infrastructure and other transformation programs across financial services, law enforcement, the travel and transport industry, and in retail as well, to name a few. So that's sort of my history. So I'd say I'm an expert, probably more just a bit battle worn, really, probably.
Fantastic. What a big warm welcome. Darren, could you also tell everyone watching a little about who you are and what you
Sh-
do?
Sure. My name's Darren Curley. I've been working in IT for 30 something years. I love the role I do at the moment, which is a CTO role, because it gives me loads of scope to still get pretty hands-on with technology and work in and around it. But my background historically, I started as a developer, worked through the ranks through architecture, and have delivered some pretty large infrastructure changes for some of the biggest brands in the country. I too have worked a lot of contract, so hired gun that's gone in, done the transformation, and handed over to BAU teams to run things. But then I've also gone back to change them once they finish running their normal life. So whole life cycle, which is really good to see. Of late, I've been focusing a little bit more on divestments, which are, for anybody that's been in and around them, pretty fast-paced, typically going towards greenfield unless it's an industry buyer, and very interesting to stand up whole IT organizations.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you both on here. And considering your experience, I'm quite excited to unlock some of the insights that you've gained throughout the years. And Byron, I know this is a subject very close to your heart because many businesses out there are guilty of falling in love with the solution or the latest shiny technology and end up losing sight of the outcome and what they want to achieve. So I'm going to start with a fairly big question here, Byron. Where should a company begin when creating a vision for its cloud transformation strategy?
I'll agree with you that there's been a bit of a curve in my opinion, specifically around the cloud transformation stuff. I guess there's been initially a real propensity to try and drive into cloud. And that still exists, but I think there's been some practicality and pragmatism that's come back to it as people think to themselves, well, okay, why am I there? What I want to leverage of it and what value? So, I mean, the few things that I really start with is, well, one, how are you going to get buy-in for it? So focus maybe with business outcomes. Where are you going to get the greatest return? And maybe think evolution and not revolution. I've seen a lot of transformation programs kind of fall off the track a little bit because they try and eat too much of the problem at the same time and subsequently can't keep the organization focused on it enough to see the value, and it almost loses energy eventually. So so really think about those things, and also think about, a lot of companies do have a significant slice of their IT spend is actually keeping the lights on to a certain degree, whether it be just running the infrastructure, but more importantly, how to kind of keep it stable, keep it secure, keep it running efficiently. And, I think if you can look at synergies between how that spend's done and how you then redivert that spend, have a more positive influence on your change. So almost using that maintenance as a change vehicle, the more likely it is that the business will see value as opposed to pure cost out of IT, and that helps get that kind of sponsorship. So there's a few things in there, but for me, it's about bringing that pragmatism and always thinking, well, if I'm a business sponsor, and I'm seeing a lot of money go out on this thing, what's in it for me? Because really, that's really key. If people know what's in it for them, you're going to keep that buy-in. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, great points. And Darren, I suspect you've had a lot of experience and seen a lot of things out there in various companies, and you've seen what goes right and things when they go wrong and how they could be avoided. So is there anything that you can add on that and on creating that vision for a cloud transformation strategy?
Yeah, it's always a challenge to think beyond the first step for organizations. Business cases are predicated on a return on a single action almost, rather than a roadmap of activities. And the journey to cloud for me means that you're not just going into a consolidation, optimization, and moving kit to the cloud. You're also going to try and exploit the powers of the cloud, and you're trying to transform your business to be an online business effectively, even though it's probably still a bricks and mortar business. You're trying to actually get the benefits of those digital organizations, as well as some of the cost savings. And I think the first step that most people take is a cost saving step, which is always difficult because you end up with the same things in a different location. So I think what people have got to do is get a little bit more open-minded about how they actually make that first step in terms of the journey, to make sure they don't put themselves into too much of a corner. But I completely agree with Byron. You've got to be careful with your aspirations not to go too far in terms of those transformation pieces, because you still have to get into the cloud to be able to access some of these things. So failing to get there would be not a good result.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when you actually write it down on paper, a cloud transformation project almost seems a little bit too easy, a little bit too simple. And one of the first obstacles any business encounters is also the complexity of multi-cloud environments. So Darren, on that, can I ask you to expand on the secret to trying to simplify a process like that?
For me, it's a very straightforward thing. You may end up in a multi-cloud environment, but you have to have certain core capabilities. And you've got to really think of it almost in terms of how you used to with data. So data always had a system of record. Well, you almost need a cloud of record for certain functions so that you know where you're trying to achieve something from. Otherwise, you could end up doing everything everywhere, and that doesn't typically lead to good results. So I think as long as you've got a good curated set of services that you deliver consistently from the clouds you choose, it actually gets quite easy, because the worst thing you can do is try to do everything in all clouds. We're currently on a journey in the organization that I'm in, and we've very strongly set out from the start where we're going to put our security apparatus, where we're going to do our generic hosting, where we're going to do all of the pieces to ingress into both those clouds and egress out of those clouds. And that's been really strong to message to both our suppliers and our internal folks what skills they're going to need where. So I think I'd encourage everybody to focus on that almost cloud of record, if you like, as a kind of a mini statement.
And Byron, for anyone struggling with or feeling daunted by the complexity of multi-cloud environments, is there any advice that you would offer?
Well, first of all, I'd very much agree with Darren about the principles about workload or service placement, how you use them. I think that's key, and it helps focus and provide some sense about how it's used and when it's used. I think some of the key things are really often some of the fundamental things trip organizations up a little bit. So as you move into cloud, any issues that you have operationally kind of can become magnified. So examples of that may be if your security practice needs some uplift, or if your ability to maintain a CMDB, a central management database, is not particularly well founded, those sorts of things. As you almost diversify your deployment of services, those issues become worse. I think, Darren, you mentioned around discrete services, understanding the services you're delivering and how you deliver them. So if you want to change them, DR exposures, again, if you're not really well understood how you're doing it before you make the change, then understanding how it's impacted when you make the change is key. So some of these fundamental things, looking for maybe synergies across the areas. If you're going to use one hyperscaler, when is it that you would use native tools in the hyperscaler versus where for pure operational reasons you want to keep consistency between those clouds, so you might choose to use a best of breed or another industry tool. So those sorts of things, I think they're quite fundamental, but they by themselves help simplify and take some of the risk out of that.
And another problem that I've seen is obviously with the tech skill shortage at the moment, a company should choose the right cloud solution for their right initiative and what they want to achieve. But equally, there is a tech skill shortage. So securing the skilled resources required to bring their cloud transformation strategy to life could also end up being challenging. So Darren, do you think a shortage of expertise could actually influence a cloud transformation strategy? And if it can, should it?
I absolutely think it can influence it. Organizations have typically got another purpose. They're not IT organizations, the vast majority in the UK, Europe, and the rest of the world. There's only a small percentage that are really true technology companies. So I think cloud offers an opportunity, first of all, to take some of those skills out of the organization. As you move to platform as a service, the PaaS services, you're shifting that responsibility onto the cloud platforms, which helps you in terms of skill retention because you're going to somebody with a leverage model with benefits of scale. I think in terms of individual organizations, you still need to have sufficient skills to tackle the last set of problems we were just talking about, making sure you've got the right services in the right place, making sure that they're still running, making sure they are fit for purpose for your end users. So I think there's a slight shift away from almost the creation of technical services towards almost the procurement and governance of them. And organizations have got to make that shift according to their size and according to their risk appetite on how much they want to outsource effectively to the hyperscalers. And the other big thing for me is all of the hyperscalers are different. You've got ones that come from a software background, ones that come from a pure digital background to service their own platforms. And you've also got ones which are sort of a retail-driven organization that's exploited its services for others. So you've got to really think hard as well about where you are in that gamut of hyperscalers and their backgrounds, because their solutions will tend to be towards their strengths, which pulls you in a certain direction as well. So your skills would have to then match that. So that's a real watch out for people.
And Byron, is this something that you've seen? Is it influencing people's decisions, the tech shortage at the moment?
Well, yeah, I think it absolutely is. So some companies, even the choice of hyperscaler, even if they want to deploy into cloud, can be driven, and I've seen it in a couple of instances, being driven purely by what they perceive the availability of resources are. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is the skills shortage isn't just actually confined to customers. You know, all the integrators are forever, you know, almost competing with the market to be able to keep retention of skilled resources as well. So, I mean, one of the things I think is becoming a little bit more common is thinking about how do you best leverage between a partner and yourselves. So if you're going to run as an organization some elements of it yourselves, how can you get your partner to help enable your organization rather than purely relying on your partner? Because sometimes that can be a better value proposition for some companies so that they can enable themselves. And that really is down to sourcing strategy and other operational considerations.
And another topic a lot of businesses are hot on at the moment, of course, is not just firefighting problems or focusing on keeping the lights on, etc. And it's much more about providing value to the business. So can you share any insights on how a business can go beyond keeping the lights on and go into that ideal utopia towards operational resilience and scalability? I think that's what everybody wants to get to. But is that realistic, Darren?
I think it is realistic if you go about it in the right sort of way. So if your intentions are to achieve certain outcomes, then you really need to make sure that you've got that in from day one. It's very easy to get seduced by the hyperscalers and investment cases that they may put forward. But you've always got to think about what your target's going to be, because they may only get you part of the way through the journey if they actually make an investment case to move you from ground to cloud, for example. So I think the areas that you really need to focus in on, though, are cloud native is a number of things to a number of people. And it could be anything from being able to run natively on their hypervisors and their PaaS services, all the way through to being able to leverage Kubernetes clusters and have that scale out, scale up type paradigm that everybody's been aiming for over the years. I think the challenge that you've got is how far can you go in one jump? And I alluded to this on the first question you asked. And I think you've got to get a foot in the cloud, and then you've got to almost have some aspiration to make the most of the cloud and make the cloud work for you. Too many organizations take that first step and almost come out of the cloud because the costs are higher than they were on premise, because that first capitalization piece hasn't happened, and it's all OpEx. So you really have to be super, super careful that you get to your target state is probably the key message. And that target state needs to be matched by your funding model in that switch from CapEx to OpEx.
Fantastic advice. And Byron, presumably you've had a lot of experience in this field too. It's not a mythical island. So is there any advice you'd offer towards achieving that operational resilience and scalability?
From my perspective, I think there are a lot of things, and some of what Darren said about a roadmap is really key. We got to bear in mind that in a lot of organizations, depending on the industry, the executive sponsors may only have a certain amount of time that they're willing to stay with that organization and move on. So whatever roadmap you put in place has almost got to have some achievability within those milestones. So then if there's some rethinking of that as a result of change of sponsor, then you've still been able to leverage value for the business. But I think also there's a thing about the patterns you use. You've got to make it fairly easy so that projects can actually deploy into the cloud to your standards in a way that there's some consistency, so you're not building complexity into there, building operational overhead, or exposing yourself from a resiliency, whether it be from an availability point of view, performance, whether it be cyber risk, any of those things. So there's a whole bunch of things about just making sure that there is a framework in place for and an understanding of who is going to make what decisions to deploy and where, kind of thing as well. And a lot of the time, I think some organizations have had a bit of a go. They've got some things in cloud, realized, to your point, Darren, that there is costs are going up. They didn't, for instance, have a financial, whether you call it FinOps or whether you just call it a cost management framework, that you can operate to, so they can govern and keep track of what they're doing. And they tend to find all of a sudden they're spending X amount more than they thought they were going to. And they go, oh, I've got catch up now because I didn't think about this at the start. So I think there's some fundamentals. If you get those right, then it's going to ease the way.
And assuming everyone's chose the right platform for their strategy, it will take them forward rather than backward. They're doing everything right. How important is working with the right partner to accompany them on that cloud transformation journey? Is it something that people underestimate? And Darren, I'll send that to you first.
I think it's absolutely vital. And I think it's wider than cloud. I think all organizations you work with, you should be aiming for partnership so that you can get through the peaks and troughs of projects, peaks and troughs of strategy delivery. So partnership is vital in all aspects, specifically so in cloud, because the amount of levers you can pull yourself, the amount of things that you can do yourself beyond what that cloud actually gives you become vastly limited. So it's really, really important to make sure that when you are choosing that partner, when you are making those technology choices, it's aligned to what the business really needs in terms of outcomes. And it's plotting you forward to a real business future that everybody's bought into. And Byron made a really good point on the last question around progressively, incrementally delivering value, delivering change so that it's sustainable. Gone are the days of 3-year large programs that deliver everything at the end, and they don't really deliver everything at the end. Cloud in its very nature, its very essence, is agile, it's continuously integrated, continuously developed, and businesses have to change their mindset as well to work in that way. Then the partners can support you at the right level, rather than it being a grandiose ask that they can never service.
And Byron, just to wrap up today's conversation, is there anything you'd like to add on that?
Well, I think there's two things that relate to some of what Darren was saying. One, I think what we're seeing is if we can establish, if you like, almost a strategic pairment with our customers, even if we're one of the suppliers in an ecosystem of suppliers at the top end, then even that helps drive how we might offer up services to the client, but also even how we deliver what we've got today. Is what we're doing for a company today still relevant 2 years in? Well, if we don't keep hand in hand with what the customer is doing and have those conversations at a level that are almost without agenda, they're almost, well, where are you going? What are you doing? Well, we think we could contribute this, that kind of thing. That sort of relationship helps keep us all lined up. And that way it's less likely that deliveries will become contentious, or that all of a sudden, even if Kyndryl were delivering exactly what they said they would to the client, if that's no longer relevant to the client, that's going to be seen as causing tension as well. And I think the other thing is just making sure that we're all kind of working to the same direction, and that direction will move around a little bit. You're thinking about a 10-year kind of vision, of which you can see 18 months of it, and it's going to be iterated all the time. Well, we've got to keep on top of that.
Well, Byron, thank you so much for joining me today. And also, Darren, thanks for sharing your insights. I genuinely appreciate both of your time. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Around the WaterCooler. And remember, we have so much more content to dive into on the CIO WaterCooler website and CIO WaterCooler TV. So please remember, check it out and let us know if there's anything else that you'd like us to discuss in future episodes.